Way back in 1996, communication was hectically expensive in South Africa. It was really, really expensive. We had a really bad monopoly on the telco situation at the time. And the internet service providers that were around then, and I guess we were fortunate, we had quite a few, they were all interconnecting through the likes of the BBNs and the Sprints of the world. And so very easily we recognized that there was huge cost saving to be had to get some sort of local connectivity going. And at the start, there were just four service providers. We met, we chose a location in Johannesburg that was common. It was really closest to one of the larger internet telecom exchanges at the time. And it just so happened for us that the building that one of the exchange point participants was in had a fair amount of space. So we rented out the space, we put in a switch, and the members agreed at the time to bring in circuits. There was a thing called BGP, which most of us were doing at that time anyway. So it was fairly easy to plug it all in and then connect. I think at the time we had something like 256 kilobits a second of international connectivity, which was a lot. I don't remember the numbers, but it was really a lot. And by the end of the week, we were doubling that in terms of local traffic, just in terms of what was being transmitted across the exchange point. So if you had to look at it from, was this necessary at the time? After a week, when everybody was connected and changing traffic, it was definite that this was something good for us. A week after we started the Internet Exchange Point, the telco response at the time was to issue a press statement saying that they would not sell in any new international capacity to any operator in the country. So obviously there were a few operators at the time that had leased their own private circuits and they were okay. But the announcement that the teleco would absolutely not sell new circuits was a big shock to all of us. Now, fortunately, we were peering at that stage. There were the four of us that were peering, so we were able to get traffic backwards and forwards between each other. And I think that definitely, in hindsight, did good for us because more people were going, oh, how do we then start connecting to the other internet service providers? So, what didn't necessarily aim to be what certainly wasn't intended as a way to get people connected to the exchange point worked into our favor. More people got there because they were worried about how they were going to get at least their local traffic, their local email at the time, delivered. Well, at the start it was really small, and we realized that we didn't want to make it too extravagant and too large. Besides, there was this question of how was it going to be managed if it was going to become a big entity. So our goals were really to try to keep costs down to a minimum. So a very simple, it was a 10 megabit switch at the time. We didn't even have a full server to do any kind of statistics or monitoring or anything. We relied on volunteers and other participants at the exchange point to do that. So yeah, the switch was basically funded by the first four participants that came in because they agreed it was for communal good, and it was handed over a little later to the Internet the Internet Service Providers Association, who was then said, well, we've got this up and running, we'd like you to look after this, and the ISPA took over from there. When I think about internet exchange points, the first thing I always say is you've got to make the connection to the exchange point worthwhile for the participant. So cost is a real issue for a lot of operators. Cost and value, right? And while this may not be the case in a large portion of the more developed world, cost is still a big factor here in Africa. How do you keep the cost to connect to the exchange point low? And you do that simply by not trying to build big fancy internet exchange points. The internet exchange point is still fundamentally a layer 2 switch with a few services tailored around it. Simple monitoring, simple measurement of the traffic so that you can report on statistics. But if you try to build it to be, a 9-cabinet monstrosity from the start, that's going to raise your cost. That's going to raise your cost to run the exchange point and to build the exchange point. Any exchange point operator has usually only got one way to get that back from the participants. You either charge a port fee or a membership fee. And if that's high at the start, then operators are not going to want to interconnect. So you should absolutely avoid doing anything that drives up that membership / port fee / whatever it is that's sustaining your IX because you want people to interconnect. And as more people interconnect, as you see the relative gains that you'd get, lower economies of scale on equipment costs, as more people interconnect, then it becomes a lot easier and a lot cheaper to put in additional services. If we had tried to fork out about R1 million a few years ago, our members would have hated us. The model right now in Africa is largely you put in a switch, it's sitting in somebody's closet somewhere, people interconnect, and that's it. You usually get connected, you usually just announce your prefixes at the start, and you forget about it. And in a lot of cases, in some of the work we've done, we've seen that people, once they've interconnected to the exchange point, they forget that there's usually an exchange point because it just works, right? So what happens is they get new address space from Afrinic, the Regional Internet Registry, and they forget that, we need to announce this address space to the registry. So there's work that needs to be done from the operator side to say, well, I've got to keep my traffic going through the exchange point. But there's work that needs to be done from the exchange point operator side as well. And in a lot of cases, a lot of exchange points in Africa have come through equipment donations. So when a switch is donated, you think, yeah, no problem. We can charge nothing for this, and we can run, and things usually work out that way. And usually there's no element of, well, what shall we do if the switch fails? How do we get a second switch working? Or who do we call if the fiber's been broken, or I need a port moved, or something simple like that? So you absolutely need some sort of skilled resource to be available to you to make simple changes at the internet exchange point. I remember when I got online, at least in the commercial world back in '97, it was terrible trying to get to a South African internet website because none of the stuff was housed locally. Everything was housed usually in a server just outside of New York at the time, just about everything. And there was little to no technical content in South Africa, or any kind of content in South Africa, no e-business or nothing of the sort. Today, I'm very glad to say the case is very, very different. We've happily sustained most e-commerce sites within the country, governments online, the newspapers are online. We obviously don't have as much content as we'd like. I don't think there's ever a case where you're in a situation where you're happy with that. But we create and develop our own content, we host it locally, and it works for us. We're able to take that content and ship it. If I look through statistics that operators sometimes share with me, we're able to take the content that we create in South Africa and share that within the region, within the SADC region, and also overseas into expats that are living overseas, travelers, or people that just want to know what's going on in South Africa. We have about 85 participants. It's probably closer to 89. I haven't checked my statistics, but well over the 80 number. The regulator didn't really think that this was a challenge in terms of us getting connected. So we were lucky there. Of course, the incumbents screamed left, right, and center about them needing a license to interconnect everybody. And literally, what we did was explain that the exchange point, up until the router at the exchange point, was simply an extension of already licensed networks. So there was no need for an exchange point license. And we were lucky because the regulator saw our case in the situation. They recognized that they were just different networks, all happened to be in a convenient location. So no, the incumbent didn't pitch up at the exchange point. 17 years later, they're still not there, but that hasn't stopped us. And today, I'm glad to sit here and tell you that the Jinx is a fairly large exchange point, at least by African standards. I would say we have an excellent relationship with the regulator locally. They are not in any way obstructive to the policies that we've proposed and the interconnection and the ways that we do things. And that's been the case for many years now. One of the smartest things we did at the Johannesburg Exchange Point was we decided from the start it had to be a neutral organization that supported this. We didn't have one at the stage. We figured that the Internet Service Providers Association would be the best tool for that purpose, and it has. It's served very well over the 17 years of growth. So absolutely, I'm a neutral organization, non-affiliated, key to that environment. I think a good thing that we did at the start was we didn't mandate how people connected. So we had a good mix of small operators, of large operators, all connect to the internet exchange point. And then amongst themselves, work out the details. Yes, we'll peer with you. No, we won't peer with you yet, but maybe later. We stayed out of that process. And I think that was an important element because it makes people feel that they're not pressured into into us telling them how to run their business. And that was an important part. That's one of the trust building elements. I think it's also important that the people that are running the exchange point are known and respected in the community as well. You know, that you have this indication that the guy that's running this actually does know what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. So that's a key element for us as well. In addition to Jinx, and Jinx was a self-funded switch, we've changed Jinx over several times, but the initial startup cost was a 10 meg switch. In today's terms, it would probably be a 100 megabit switch, and it's about $1,000, I think, no more than that. Of course, today people want statistics and stuff from the start, so you'd have to factor in a server, and that's probably about another $1,500 perhaps. So I would put the startup cost in today's terms, including some time and configuration, no more than 3,000 to 5,000, I think, to get it working. We were lucky because we then started two different exchange points, the Cape Town exchange point and the Durban exchange point. But at that stage, members understood why they needed to connect, so they were very eager to interconnect. And at that stage, vendors started to understand that their customers were coming to these internet exchanges, and they wanted to be seen as participating with us. So today, when I look, the Cape Town exchange point was revisited in 2009. The equipment at Sinks was kindly sponsored by one of the larger router switch vendors. So they sponsored two switches for us. And Dinks, which was started in September 2012, also had equipment sponsored entirely. And today, when I look at getting new equipment for Jinx, I'm fortunate because we have a better relationship with vendors through working with them for many years, and they're happy to come to us and say, yes, we're willing to even sell you gear at heavily discounted prices. It works for them. Initially, we were in a separate closet that was attached to the building that one of the operators was in, and the operator lent technical assistance. So somebody would need a router rebooted, or they would need a cable moved or something, and the operator would kindly lend assistance to them. At that stage, it was a cost that was borne by the participants of the exchange point. So perhaps I should have mentioned from the start, we've always agreed that the exchanges needed to be self-sustaining. We have, if you connect to the exchange points in South Africa, there's a port cost attached to that. So you pay the port cost, and literally that's it. There's really no other fee. There's no exchange point membership fee or anything like that that's applicable. Through the collection of those fees, we were obviously able to sustain and support the internet exchange point, one of those expenses being the rent that's necessary for the facility, for the area that we're in. We've, over the years, sort of come to a different agreement with the different service providers. The host of the Cape Town and the Johannesburg exchange point, for example, we have an agreement with them where they see the exchange point as being extremely valuable to them. They see it as being a marketing win, if you'd like. So they give us the space free. So we have the equivalent of probably about 10 cabinets that have been donated, the facility space, the power, and the cabinets that have been donated by the operator because they see value in having the internet exchange point close to them, and that's been the case for a while. We're expanding now, we're moving into different locations, so it's quite conceivable that we're going to start paying for a lot of the cabinet space that we're going to be using in new locations. But we're fortunate that we've also built up a little bit of cash over time, so we can sustain these costs moving forward. Wherever there's an internet exchange point, there's a need for more than general, simple, basic networking skills. You need to have people that understand at least how to do BGP and how to get traffic moving and engineered properly between different internet service providers. So yeah, I would definitely agree that the internet exchange point has helped improve the general overall technical skills of the community. It's absolutely necessary, and it was very evident where that wasn't. When international bandwidth started to become cheap and internet service providers started to connect not just to the local internet exchange points, but you started to see them pop up in some of the European internet exchange points, it became obvious to the technical community locally which of the internet service providers hadn't configured their networks properly or who needed assistance. And it was largely because of the internet exchange points locally that they were saved the cost of backhauling traffic through misconfigurations out through London or Amsterdam or whatever. It was not sufficient just to have the simple layer 2 connection. We needed to be able to provide more information to the participants that were at the exchange point. And obviously, one of the things that people ask for all the time is statistics. People love to see statistics, and statistics is an excellent indication of growth. So, I'm able to look back and say over 17 years of service, we started off at the 256 kilobits a second in 1996. And today we've got more than 7-8 gigs worth of traffic across the shared fabric, across the public infrastructure, because we've got all of those statistics. And that's a good indicator for me for what an international operator, what a global carrier is going to want to see. So when they start evaluating whether or not an internet exchange point is a good place for them to invest in, to build out to, being able to show them this consistent growth over these years, that's a great thing for me. But obviously, an exchange point is more than just traffic and statistics. So we wanted to co-locate important services there for the longest period of time. In South Africa, the .co.za namespace is quite large. It's got over 1 million names or so. And we've had the DNS server available at the Internet Exchange Point for well over a dozen years now. I forget the exact date. And that's obviously accessible to everybody. Uniforum who run this peer freely with everybody. And in addition to that, in addition to .co.za, we were one of the earliest adopters, probably the first DNS route in Africa, I think. Today, I'm very happy to say that through consistent efforts of working with the different operators, for instance, we've got 5 DNS routes in Africa, which is amazing for me, in South Africa at least. We've got copies of the .com, the .net, the .org, the .info, all of that. In fact, when I last counted, there were about 140 different CCTLDs available through services like PCH, through services like Affiliates, who've seen that this is an important meeting place for the community. And so they're happy to invest, they're happy to put services into our region. They can see that the exchange point is professionally run, it's professionally managed, it's a growing environment, and in turn it feeds back into the services that they provide. And hey, at the end of the day, we all win, right? Exchange points don't run themselves. You absolutely need to have community support. And even if you have one active person in the community, that active person will burn out very quickly if they don't have other people supporting them and working with them. So it's critical that at least if you've got this active person, he's able to find and connect with other active type individuals in different organizations. And that's the key. The key is to get at least 3 of these people. And once they're working together, they're interconnected, everybody else will slowly be drawn into the circle of connectivity. We have a community-run group. It's called the Exchange Point Working Group, and the Exchange Point Working Group builds and sets policy for how the Internet Exchange Points in South Africa runs. And we've done this, I would say, on a volunteer basis way back since when we started the Internet Exchange Points. It was around 1996, I think, November. Recently, we've realized that in addition to having this community spirit, this group of volunteers that builds and sets policy and decides on the operations of the exchange point, we actually need somebody to make sure that the decisions that we arrive to go out happen. So somebody has to drive this entire process, and that's now my responsibility. So looking at the sustainability of the Internet Exchange Point, making sure the exchange point can grow, spreading the word about why people that are not at the exchange point need to be there, that falls squarely into my domain. So as part of building exchange points, or as part of connecting to exchange points, engineering staff also need to spend time understanding that building sustainable networks, growing sustainable networks, is not a simple matter of plug and play. You need to invest time and skill. So the human element of understanding your network, of growing your network, becomes a lot more important. The idea that you can move traffic in a particular way through a local internet exchange point and apply different rules to an international exchange point sometimes doesn't always work out the way you'd like it to. So staff are kind of forced to become better than what they are right now. They need to learn traffic engineering they need to learn traffic engineering tips and tricks to make more effective use of their resources locally now, and well, if they're connecting internationally as well. So that goes back to building your own local skills, building your own BGP experts. Nobody's born a BGP expert. You've got to experiment, you've got to learn. And the fact that African networks don't necessarily always build out, or they don't interconnect in more than one places, is one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of people on the continent today that can stand up and say, hey, I know quite a bit about this kind of stuff. So as these networks expand, as more exchange points grow up, as it hopefully becomes easier for cross-border networks to be built, as it becomes easier for internet service providers to connect into different regions in Africa and beyond, that skill set just increases. The Jenks today has internet service providers from South Africa, obviously. We've got internet service providers from other countries. So we're serving right now as an interconnection point for, say, Namibia and Swaziland and Botswana, and even up into Zambia. So we've got quite a few countries in the SADC region, even some of the islands like Mauritius. We've got people that are moving traffic through the Johannesburg exchange point. But these are still traditional service providers. And in addition to that, we've got people that do streaming. There's a very popular streaming company, an online media company that's connected directly to the exchange point, and they've just put in an upgrade on their circuit. We've got one of the largest banks in the country who has seen that online and e-commerce is the way of the future for them. So they've been very, very active in promoting access to digital content, and they're one of the largest, if not the largest, non-traditional peer at the exchange point today. We have a constitution that drives the running of the internet exchange points. And although the internet exchange points are formally run through the Internet Service Providers Association currently, the mechanics of that are slightly different. We have a community managed group. We call it the INCS working group. And the INCS working group is open to any participant that is at the internet exchange point. And that's a mix of local, as in South African participants. But we also have people that are not, peers that are not South African. And some of them participate in the INCS working group as well. So effectively, the INCS working group sets policy. A good example would be us deciding to go multi-site. So we proposed the idea, we wrote up the paper and suggested it to the INCS working group. We discussed it, and there was support for it. There was general consensus within the working group. We took the general consensus back into to ISPA to say the INCS working group has said this is how and what they would like to happen, and ISPA literally just rubber stamps the process, and we go ahead. So that's how I get to expand the internet exchange points in Johannesburg. We've very recently started a group called the African Internet Exchange Point Operators Group. So it's a group that's very closed. It's meant entirely for internet exchange point operators in Africa, or people who are in advanced stages of setting up an exchange point. And literally the idea is very simple. It's to get the exchange point operators to talk and work with other internet exchange point operators in Africa. To be able to support each other, maybe help in policy development, to share ideas, to share problems and solutions that have come out of that. And who knows, maybe we can move equipment between us, but the idea is basically to build capacity at operator level, at exchange point operator level, to support and grow, to make sure we don't have the failure rate that we see with exchange points now. We've got a 25% failure rate with exchange points in Africa that start up and then just don't do anything. And that doesn't hurt. That doesn't help. In fact, it hurts, because an exchange point that doesn't work is an indication to the community at a later stage that, hey, this didn't work 2 years ago. Well, what is there to make us think it's going to work now? And we want to totally get rid of that expectation. We want to show them that there's a local organization that can grow and support them. That's what we're trying to do with the AFIX. One of the biggest problems we made when we started the Internet Exchange Point was to say that the exchange point was going to be limited only to members of the Internet Service Providers Association, by far. And at the time, that was more a knee-jerk reaction to the teleco situation. And that's worked well for us, because we're at the bottom of the world, South Africa. small connected country monopoly. But when our market started to liberalize, so 2005, 2006, when we started to get a second carrier and when VoIP became deregulated, it was very evident to us that in order to get other operators in, this idea about tying the internet exchange point to an entity that was solely committed to the internet service providers in South Africa wasn't such a good idea. So the first step in that process was to remove the restriction that you had to be an ISPA member to connect to the exchange point. And we did that at about 2007, I think. My advice for new service providers starting up, absolutely one of the things would be make sure that people are able to connect to your exchange point, anybody, whoever they are. You don't want to restrict it necessarily to a particular group, an interest group or something like that, even though it might sound like it's the right thing to do at the same time. The immediate goal should be, are there people in your environment that are interested in connecting, and can you get them to the exchange point? Can you start moving traffic over and start seeing real savings and then showing those savings in simple statistics? If you can get that message across, then scaling your internet exchange point is actually really, really simple. You need an internet exchange point manager, somebody to go out there to evangelize your exchange point, at least to participants, to help them understand that it's not just about them saving on their on latency or transit costs, but about sharing the value of the content, about building a better, stronger meshed local environment that becomes, more resilient to network failures, more tolerant to international fiber cuts. When we had the recent outage in Egypt, for instance, that made the news for a couple of weeks, I'm very happy to say that largely we were quite unaffected. And I don't just mean the exchange point environment. We saw traffic go up through the exchange point, which is great for me. But at least the content management systems in South Africa, entirely unaffected. We saw nothing of that sort at all. In fact, one of the better things I'd say about having an exchange point was that we had people being able to use the internet exchange point as a way to be able to provide temporary services to other operators. So you'll see these giant spikes of gigabits worth of traffic where operators were then onward selling temporary transit to other operators. And you know what? We don't mind. Our policy is always that we build a neutral environment for you to exchange traffic. What you're choosing to exchange and the manner you want to do it, please, by all means, use the facility. It's what we want you to do. I think an important point is also not necessarily to believe that you absolutely need everybody to be at the internet exchange point. We had a lot of internet service providers that didn't want to interconnect, but that didn't stop us because we believed that the exchange point was good. Now, when I talk to people that are starting internet exchange points now, they always tell me, no, it's never going to work. This is not going to work because the telco, they're too big, they're not going to be interested in joining. And my response to them is always, 17 years later, our incumbent has not joined the exchange point. We'd love to see them there, but their absence has not deterred us in any possible way at all. We're still growing. A common question that people ask is, how many exchange points do we need in a country? Because this is a topical thing for Africa right now. And people ask me, you've got an exchange point in Johannesburg. Why did you need to build a second one in Cape Town or a third one in Durban? And I always say, the reason you do this, the reason you want to build an exchange point is obviously to save on costs and to capitalize on everything you're doing. The reasons you do the second one is exactly the same as the first. We've got very expensive, today in 2013, we still have very expensive cross-country circuits. And the reasons that we put up Johannesburg are exactly the same reasons we're doing this in Cape Town. We want the operators in Cape Town to start enjoying those benefits. We want the operators in Durban to start enjoying the same sort of benefits, local fast connectivity, to grow the online environment as well. Because that feeds. If you make it easy for people to connect in a region, then people interconnect, and businesses start investing in that region as well. People start developing and keeping content in that region. Africa is still spending a huge amount of money interconnecting to get its content delivered through American or European operators, and that's wrong. If I look at the cost saving that we see at the Jinx, there's a little bit of math involved. You've got to take into account the traffic we push, the cost of international circuits, the cost of connectivity to the exchange point. But we ran the numbers a little earlier this year, and it comes out to about a $25 million savings every year on money that would have left our economy just to be paid in submarine fiber costs. So that's a huge net saving to me. I think that's a great net saving, and again, it's resources leaving the economy that we can then take, reinvest in some way, and hopefully do more for the environment.